it's not the words that matter so much. It's the experience of that. So when we point to don't know, or I guess grammatically we would say, when we point to not knowing, if you only think the words, that's a very superficial experience. But if you embody not knowing, if you move through the world from a place of not knowing, yeah, those words don't know help you to remember that, but not knowing is an experience. Not knowing leads to a kind of curiosity, which again, it's not the word curiosity. It's the experience and the embodiment of curiosity. It's the experience and the embodiment of wonder. In these times where we don't know what's going on, none of us know how long we're going to be sheltering in place. A lot of us are struggling with loneliness, with situations that almost feel impossible to bear. For some of us, they actually do feel impossible to bear. That's experience. That's not an idea. That's an experiential moment. And our practice really points us back to the experience of not knowing. So be careful that you don't get lost in the words of it and trying to follow the words. Allow the word to be a little bit of an opening, and then go through the opening into the experience. I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was talking about my style of Dharma talks. And I said, what I just said reminded me of it, because what I do is I go in the little bit of an opening. What is this? That's the opening. And then I start to dig around. What is that really? Experientially, what is it for you? Find it in your life. Each moment is, I've been talking about this for months now, each moment is the Dharma gate that we enter in. When we enter in, we might lead with our thought, with our intellect, or we might even lead with our ideas of our emotion. I feel good. I feel bad. I feel afraid. I feel angry. I feel frustration. I feel joy. All of those are expressions of something. But our practice, this question, what is this, leads us back to the experience. So to reiterate it one more time, the point of our practice is to experience our life. Our life and ourselves are one. I am here, my life is there. That's how we separate ourselves. We separate ourselves out of fear, out of almost like it's too much. Each of us have our own reasons and our own history that have led to the separation. But our practice is about coming back and becoming one with the experience we're having. Even saying becoming one is a misunderstanding. We already are one. Remember the poem from last week. Our true self is always shining and free. That's the starting point. Return to the starting point. It's always appearing, but it's experiential. It's not intellectual. So I want to touch back to something that came up in the Dharma talk last week. Those of you who were here, you might remember that because it was Buddha's birthday, I started talking about the biography, the life of the Buddha. And I spoke about it in terms of the Buddha didn't know that there was poverty. The Buddha didn't know that there was sickness. The Buddha didn't know that there was old age. The Buddha didn't know that there was death. And I even made a joke talking about the elaborate scheme that had to take place in order to hide the truth from the Buddha. And I've been practicing Zen now, Zen specifically since 1975. So I've known about this story, and those of you who've heard me speak about it over the years know I'm kind of troubled by the ridiculous quality of the story. So I've been carrying this with me before I started teaching and then after. And I was lying in bed, actually, trying to go to sleep after the Dharma talk, and I was going over it, and it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And it's not that the Buddha didn't know about these things. It's perhaps that he didn't care about them. That he was so self-centered, so fixed on himself. And as the story goes, his father gave him everything, all the pleasures that one could have as a prince. You know, Ben talked about privilege in his talk. So the Buddha was stuck in his privilege, and something happened, and he woke up to the reality of suffering. And once he woke up to the reality of suffering, he realized all his life he didn't get it. It's not that people weren't suffering all around him. It's just that he was blind to it. We could almost say from our perspective these days, his privilege and his wealth and his place in society prevented him from actually seeing what was happening. And then in that moment where he saw it, he felt it, he experienced it, and he realized, wow, all this time I missed it. And he started to wonder, well, how did I miss it? And of course, we know the story. Then it took him off into the forest. He became a practitioner, blah, blah, blah. All 6 years later, he has this enlightenment experience. But for all of us, I think it's important to remember what we don't see, what our privilege or our neuroses or our fears, whatever you call it, stop us from experiencing. We leave as other, outside of ourselves. It doesn't touch us. But once we experience it, we realize something that's not intellectual, it's experienced. So the other night, I turned on the news for a short time, and there was a story about people lining up for blocks to get food. And of course, I knew people had lost their jobs. Some of you on this call tonight are maybe struggling with unemployment. Maybe you were laid off. Everything has changed. But in that moment of seeing those people lined up, experientially, I got it in a different way. All I could do at that moment was call up my local food bank on my computer and give a donation. That's how I handled it. But the point being that it got through my intellectualization. It got through my defenses. And once it breaks through, then experientially, we all already understand. Our true self is always shining and free. But human beings make something and enter the ocean of suffering. That making something is the way we block things, the way we choose to get lost in our own philosophical, emotional, theoretical point of view. We are not our point of view. We are not the sum total of what we think. Experientially, we become alive. Our true self is always shining and free, right now. When we ask, what am I? When we ask, what is this? When we bring up the concept of don't know, it's to open to the experiential aspect of being it, not thinking it, being it. So, as challenging as this moment in our lives is, we use it as a doorway to step into it. Rather than shy away, turn away, or use our intellectual conceptualization to protect us, we use these practice tools of not knowing, what is this, what am I, to kindle the fire of the experience. That fire is our true nature, not the idea about it, but the fire itself. Become alive right now. We already are alive, but our making something tucks us in a box and we lose contact with our aliveness. Sometimes it's emotion that opens us. Sometimes our heart just needs to crack open. Sometimes it's a sound. Sometimes it's the bird that flits past. But experientially, wake up to this moment. So I want to encourage us at all. Take to heart Ben's talk, all of that experience of what is this? What am I? Who is this thing, or what is this thing I call myself? Experientially, go into it, feel it, experience it, and then be it.